Hello and welcome, I am TheRedundantGamer and you are watching Retro Reflect, which for this first ever episode will feature the original Duke Nukem. This is not a review show, it's a reflection on retro games. Reviews are made when a game is released, not more than 20 years later. This is also why a spoiler warning should be unnecessary. It's an old game, so get over it. Let's talk about the game instead. Duke Nukem is a single-player platformer developed and published by Apogee Software. Apogee is now called 3D Realms. It was released for MS-DOS in North America in July 1991 and sequentially in Europe early in 1992. The game is divided into 3 episodes: Sharpnel City, Mission Moonbase, and lastly, Trapped in the Future. The game takes place in what was the near future when the game was released, the exotic year of 1997. The plot of the game is relatively simple. The mad scientist Dr. Proton is determined to take over the world with his army of technobots, starting from one of Earth's largest cities. All attempts by the military to counter Dr. Proton's robot army has met with failure. So as a last, final, desperate measure, the CIA hires self-proclaimed hero Duke Nukem to put a stop to Dr. Proton's plans. In the first episode, Duke shoots and jumps his way through Dr. Proton's sieged city. In episode number 2, Duke follows Dr. Proton to his secret moon base. And in the last episode, when Dr. Proton realizes that Duke has ruined his plans and escapes to a future in his time machine, Duke chases after him to put a permanent end to his evil plans. But who was this Duke Nukem then? In the first game, we know him as a gum-chewing badass, but was he from the very beginning? In the first game, not much is known about him. He's just a random hero who was enlisted to stop the madman villain from taking over the world, thus making both the hero and the plot very generic for its time. Like any good hero, Duke likes to swap insults with his nemesis. So, you're the pitiful hero they sent to stop me. I, Dr. Proton, will soon rule the world. You're wrong, Proton Breath. I'll be done with you and still have time to watch Oprah. Good one, Duke. Must have really stung that one. Because as a scientist, Dr. Proton wouldn't have known that air is made up of gases, which in turn are made up of molecules, which are made up of atoms, that in turn are made up of protons and electrons. So quite literally, every living creature on Earth has proton breath. Leaving aside silly insults, the hardcore, badass, which is chauvinistic in womanizing ways, doesn't really exist yet. They must have had an idea about the character though, so who or what was he inspired on? It's hard to tell who the original Duke was modeled after, but for Duke Nukem 3D, the question becomes ridiculously easy. So let's hypothesize that the inspiration for the first incarnation follows the same track as the third. We know that the movie They Live from 1988 was the main inspiration for Duke Nukem 3D. So what about some other movies, like Red Scorpion and Cyborg? How about Predator and Terminator? Sounds reasonable. Duke Nukem was a product of the late 80s and 90s macho man media culture. Big man, big gun, big mission that usually involved shooting stuff. The game was also a latecomer in the side-scrolling trend among video games, following in the wake of Mega Man and Bionic Commando, as well as borrowing some mechanics from those games. Duke Nukem can be said to belong to the second-generation side-scrollers. It was one of the first platformers released for PC, like Commander Keen from 1990, the first PC platformer. It helped fuel the shareware distribution model, which in turn helped PC gaming gain a greater relevance in the 1990s. Anyhow, what about the game then? Duke Nukem is a traditional arcade platform game. It's all about jumping, shooting, and collecting points. Each episode features a number of levels and ends in a boss fight with the game's main villain. The objective in each level is to reach the exit, which is the only point in the game where you can save your progress. The levels are usually divided into several parts. They're connected by doors and teleports. Most often the doors are opened by different keys you have to find around the level. However, sometimes the doors require other types of objects, like circuit boards, to open. In most levels, there are different routes you can take to the exit, some faster and some slower, which means there are a lot of things you can explore in each level. Points are scored for killing enemies and collecting items. There are also several objects in each level that can earn you bonus points, such as destroying all surveillance cameras in the level, or collecting the 4 letters of Duke, even more bonus points if they are collected in the correct order. The standard enemies in the game range from robots, helicopters, car-like bots, pink bunnies, flames and spikes. If you are unfortunate enough to take damage from these, there are a few health pickups you can collect. Soda cans that disintegrate if you shoot them, turkey legs that grind a whole turkey if you shoot it, nuclei that give you full health if you collect them. Other power-ups in the game include, among other things, pickups for better weapon range, sneakers for higher jumps, a grappling hook that allows you to cling to certain types of ceiling, and a claw that allows you to open some of Dr. Proton's conveniently positioned technology. Some of the collectible items in the game offer no health or power-ups, only points, such as floppy disks, flags, radios, and red balloons. One of the hallmarks of early DOS games is the crash movement, which was due to technical limitations. Instead of moving in individual pixels, the game shifts by 8x8 pixel blocks, which make the game feel very blocky. So, what kind of reception did the game get when it was first released? Was it as warmly received as you could guess from what most retro reviews say, that Duke Nukem is one of history's classics, and the game that spawned a gaming legend? From what I can tell, not really. However, I must warn that I couldn't find that many reviews from the early 90s. In fact, I only found one, from the German gaming magazine PC Joker, who, when the game was released in Europe in 1992, gave Duke Nukem a whopping 45%. They said that although the game mechanics weren't that bad, the EGA backdrop is just as bleak and boring as the animations for the standard enemies. The review continued to criticize the sound that only comes from the internal beeper, as well as the save function that seems needless since the game is very easy to beat. The only aspect of the game the review gave more than a meek score for was the game mechanics, the controls. They received a lukewarm 73%. Even though the reception of the game appears to have been mild, the game did receive a number of sequels, most notably the critically acclaimed Duke Nukem 3D, which took a major turn from the platform games by becoming a first-person shooter in the same vein as Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. The list between the first 3 games and the last, Duke Nukem Forever, is as long as my arm. Most of them forgotten. Sometimes they get mentioned in analyses on how violent or sex-fixated video games are, but mostly forgotten. 3D Realms had plans on creating a side-scrolling sequel to the Duke Nukem series, to tie in with the first 2 games, but still keep the interactive character of Duke made popular in the Duke Nukem 3D game. After cancellation, the project was sold to developer Inner Circle Creations that released the game as Alien Rampage in 1996. This makes me somewhat sad, since Alien Rampage is a great puzzle-solving platform shooter, and you can certainly feel the Duke Nukem influences as you play an angry alien with a bad attitude that crash lands on an inhospitable planet. The action is very gory and almost feels like Duke Nukem 3D, but in 2D. The original is much more elusive than its sequels. After a quick search, you will come up with a good number of hits for essays, reports, and analyses how explain how games like Duke Nukem 3D has made children aggressive, violent, and even homicidal. How the game markets sex and violence to America's youth, usually getting hung up on the fact that most women in the game are semi-nude. And how the game, along another RPG title, Shadow Warrior, is blatantly racist. But you won't find much mention of the first two games, the platformers. It is true Duke didn't have much character in them, we have already established that. He was just a bloke who jumped and shot stuff. They weren't overly violent or sexist. They just had a main protagonist who happened to be a muscular guy in a pink shirt who happened to watch Oprah. Because as we all know, real men wear pink. Duke you meet in the original game seems far more in touch with his softer side than the character he later became. He made some corny insults and was on his way, determined to save the day with his can-do attitude. Among the few texts you can find on the internet mentioning the first game is the angry blog of an annoyed feminist, starting with, "I don't play video games, but," who decided to do some researching on the subject of Duke Nukem after having caught sight of a poster for Duke Nukem Forever. That usually doesn't start well, letting your thoughts on a very different game from a very different time cloud your views. If you have made your decision before starting your research, you will most likely find what you're looking for and twist every fact to suit your needs. She doesn't go deeper than read Wikipedia and watch the trailer for Duke Nukem Forever. And on some points her analysis is spot on. Duke is frequently politically incorrect in the later games, and the ads for Duke Nukem Forever are horribly sexist. However, her crude analysis of the first game is hilariously off-target, as one might expect of someone who have not done the research correctly. If I have to analyze the game myself, I would begin with saying it's a fairly generic platformer with a fairly generic plot. It follows in the wake of the scrolling movement, the 1980s trend with platform side-scrollers, but has some interesting mechanics not present in early platformers. From Mega Man, released in 1987, it has borrowed a non-linear level structure. To explain what this means, compare the level structure to Super Mario Bros., where you just go right until you find the exit. In Duke Nukem, the scrolling is multi-directional, like it is in many of the second-generation side-scrollers. Duke Nukem also borrowed the grappling hook mechanic that was first introduced in Bionic Commando in 1987. The mechanic would later be included in games such as Earthworm Jim and Tomb Raider. As previously mentioned, Duke Nukem was one of the first console-styled platformers for the PC. Along with games such as Jill of the Jungle and Cosmos Cosmic Adventure, the game helped pioneer the software model and make PC gaming a valid substitute to consoles. If I would apply a trope to the game, one that doesn't appear on its page on TV Tropes, I would say that Duke Nukem is an unfairly simple game. The game's difficulty doesn't come from how taught the enemies are or how hard the level itself is, but rather how the game screws with you. It often forces you to blind jump and drops you on top of enemies or obstacles. Many health pickups, especially the soda cans that disintegrate if you shoot them, are placed together with enemies so that you often end up shooting them. Thus, each time you die and come back to the beginning of the level, you don't feel like it was your fault for dying, but rather the game that cheated you. Throughout this reflection, you may have noticed something rather strange on the video. My version of the game says Duke Nukem instead of Duke Nukem. That is because Apogee became aware after the first version of the game that there was already a character named Nuke'm, a villain in Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Since they thought the name was copyrighted, they changed the name, but on closer inspection they find out it hadn't been registered, leaving the way for Apogee to register the name themselves and continuing using the name throughout the series. So, what can we learn from this then? That a great retro game doesn't have to be well liked in its own time? Real men eat meat, and if they shoot meat, it will grow bigger. Insults doesn't have to be great or even correct to sting. And what's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other word, would still smell as sweet. Thank you for watching this episode of Record Reflect. I've been the Redundant Gamer, and Record Reflect will be back in 2 weeks, so please come back and watch that. Next week there will be another retro video, and if you want to know what it is, you'll just have to wait and see. All that's left for me to say is, thank you for watching, goodbye, see you next week.